The Sleepers, Chapter 25, Modus Discovery. Almost 3 years had passed since we started at SleepFree. We were men of routine, driven by success, or rather motivated by our failure. Each day I clocked out only to resume my second and third jobs, sleep for Ray, and research Project Cumulus for all. Drug discovery was taxing, but I held on believing I had to succeed, eventually. All the while I remembered Carl's prophecies, and I looked for the clouds. Creating Cumulus, the drug which would transform sleepers into lucid dreamers, would not come easily. 2 primary obstacles opposed its discovery. First, the drug had to possess sister properties to the current SleepFree cocktail, or it would be too radical a change. I would never trick the system. Second, I had to accelerate the testing timescale to measure efficacy in a matter of months, not the anticipated years. In other words, I predicted that the chemical would unlock mental patterns over time with recurring dosages and practice. At actual prescribed sleeper cocktail dosage levels, I could spend 2 or more years testing a single compound before declaration, be it failure or success. Finding such sluggish progress objectionable, I risked an accelerated schedule. After sufficient lab rat tests to alleviate concerns of immediate physical harm, I would test the compounds personally at increasingly higher dosage rates, cutting testing time down to 2 months or less. Allowing for an additional 2 months for system detox and reboot between drugs, I had tested close to 10 compounds rather than just 1 since starting. Obstacle 2 eliminated. Overcoming Obstacle 1 was more difficult. The sleep-free drugs had evolved since inception with over 30 patented formulae. However, the 3 key active ingredients remained relatively unchanged. 1 promoted sleep even when alert, 1 marked the sleep regenerative chemical for extraction, and 1 amplified the dream sleep sensors in the cortex, thereby improving wave transmission and recording. SleepFree's patent mix included other non-essential drugs to condition the body for prolonged sleep, such as urination suppressants and digestive accelerants. Comically, these tertiary drugs inhibited bedwetting. More importantly, they attempted to minimize potential lethargy from too much sleep. Desirous to accomplish my task in this lifetime, I precluded following the shotgun Edisonian approach, 99 ways how not to make a light bulb. Instead, I specifically targeted the 3 primary chemicals. I explored changes to promote stimulation, believing if you could be both asleep and stimulated, you may lucidly wake in the dream state. The challenge, of course, was to achieve stimulated sleep, an oxymoronic event by nature. I knew the 3 compounds by heart. IP pirates had extracted and published the formulae years ago. Regardless, school and work required rote molecular repetition of the trifecta cocktail. I started in drug development, and barring the need to recover proximity to Ray, I intended to stay here. This gave me open access to all research notes. Armed with memorized details, no one could leave company premises with restricted information. I performed my true research at home. My private laboratory, locked away in the 2nd bedroom, was obscure and chilling. It had a melancholic presence, void of belonging, bathed in revenge. The white tiled walls were sterile but could not erase that musky smell from caged rats and drug synthesis materials. 1 fan near the back wall attempted to replace the air with crisp movements from the open window, but curtains, closed to block any peeping eyes from neighboring apartments, restricted adequate airflow. Given my employment at SleepFree and my lineage, it was not so villain-esque to actually possess a personal laboratory. I could just as well claim it on my taxes. Laboratory supplies to support desired dream conditioning for client Ray Huxley Madsen, i.e., homework to encourage me to dream of the right stuff. The mechanism was in place, but still no discovery. I had expected the continuation of core science from university to employment, all focused on sleep drugs, to transcend itself into an elegant and immediate solution. Providence forced me to work with little reward and no company, and each drug that did not bring lucidity brought something worse, unintended consequences in the form of terrible side effects. Migraines came often. Long-term impacts from so much experimentation were impossible to predict. Ray's work proved more fruitful than my own, and, despite my headaches, more terribly disconcerting. I stayed abreast of every development through our lunch exchanges. He never could keep secrets as quiet as company policy dictated, especially for someone assigned to the most clandestine group within the company. Secrets ensured the family monopoly, but to Ray, I was family, as was any waiter or patron at our usual Chinese restaurant who cared to listen. The Frontier Science Division offered Ray the latitude to study any tangential topic of his choice. Company policy, a la Desmond Matson, protected this group's freedom to innovate. Without such flexibility and opportunity, there would be no SleepFree. Needing structure to counterbalance his short attention, Ray floundered within the confines of this freedom. His first 6 months passed without him even picking a topic. According to the lunchtime dialogue, Ray's father was ready to pull the plug on this first assignment. Threatened with something worse, like middle management, Ray had an epiphany. Of all the endless possibilities from which to choose, he managed to pick the one topic that would make me the most irritated and nervous. Freedom debilitated Ray, but he decided to gift it to all, or at least try. He proposed finding a substitute for sleepers. I was furious. Cumulus was to be my creation, not his. Perhaps I had dreamed too much, and he now proposed his own version of my vision. I loathed him even more for trying to take away my destiny. This was not jealousy, it was bitterness. Lunch after lunch, I learned of his progress. Meager at first, as he hypothesized and planned, then his work shaped into success. The company hired research assistants at his request, starting with the shy Kirsten, a nervous girl with a bad habit for tapping her nails, and the well-groomed Pradeep, who had more oil in his hair than in his kitchen. Within a year, Ray's team numbered 10, including many of the best and often geekiest that Dr. Santos ever produced. They tackled drug synthesis and preservation, artificial REM generation, and downloadable dream content. In 2 years, his team expanded again, exploring fringe alternatives like adapted animal sleep. Armed with freedom and direction, they ignored every rule, discarding every assumption. He poached the most brilliant senior scientists within the company, and even a few from academia, like rival professor Laura Powell. She'd been tagged as Lucius's replacement until ruthlessly establishing her own counter lab in Qatar. She had been a hard sell. I figured, given enough time, Ray would directly employ Lucius himself. With the right minds and resources, his team discovered piece by piece a path to sleeper substitution and ultimate independence. SleepFree kept the work quiet, except for maybe Ray's careless whispers to me. We couldn't have our nuisance competitors enter this new frontier first via espionage. As his team succeeded, I became more desperate to discover Cumulus. Even if the sleeper system tumbled, I needed the triumph. I needed to beat Ray. He stumbled into greatness, but I deserved it. I felt I was getting close to a breakthrough when Ray shared his latest news over Wednesday lunch. My dad's having me present at the annual SSC review. That's nice. What are you covering? I asked casually, assuming that this was just another step in grooming the future CEO. One had to be taught how to navigate through bureaucracy, and speaking before the Senate was a logical step. I'm presenting my work, of course, he replied, half surprised by my question. I dropped my chopsticks. What? I thought no one was supposed to know. He had hardly started eating his food and smiled proud at my surprise. It's time for the next step. We have a solution for all 3 elements. Yes, some are more elegant than others, but it's sufficient for a prototype. Next step is to start human trials, a process that requires the committee's approval. Then on to deployment. Ray's news should have elated me. It should have made me truly happy. The key to a new life. He could eliminate sleep slavery and bless all castes with borrowed sleep. Wasn't that the point of everything I was doing? But I had invested too much. Since the day I made peace with Carl Schleife, I had known my course and I intended to finish it. And the thought of lucidity was so tempting. The visit to the SSC was just the start of an upsetting lunch. With earthquakes come aftershocks, and tsunamis. He took a bite to let the impact of his plan sink in, raised his eyebrows, and then launched the second assault. I'm taking Gabby out to celebrate tonight before I leave for D.C. We're celebrating 2.5 years together. Congrats, I ricocheted coldly, still stewing over his first dropped bomb. He continued, actually staring at me for once to mark my reaction. I'm going to propose to her after the trip. I'm ready to get married. The next heir of SleepFree is running out of time. Only great concentration to form the right response kept me from screaming. I was the one running out of time. I couldn't lose everything at this point in life, and definitely not to Ray. Congrats again, Ray, I choked up, though honestly, I'm surprised it took you this long. I always imagined Ray swooning over the first girl, showing any interest, and then running away to pursue some quixotic paradise in the sun. The fact that he waited 2 years kept me hopeful that nothing would ever come of Gabby, or of Ray's love life. I deluded myself into thinking I still had time. My plan could still work. With deep contemplation, he replied, Samantha hurt more than I've admitted. I've dated so many women, and so many have felt right, or I've made them feel right. With Gabby, it's different. She is naturally right, no inner persuasion required. I just needed to prove it with time. I'm ready now to take the plunge. Maybe Ray knew the skipping metaphor. Good for you, I muttered, anxious to slip away into my own thoughts. Even the delicious General Tso's couldn't make me happy. I tried to find solace in laughter. Their kids were going to have such messy hair. I remembered Ray walking sullenly through the cold night of Samantha's departure. She broke both our hearts that day. Pretending not to feel anything didn't make her memory fade. Now my research was my priority. But even discovery wouldn't matter if Ray convinced the SSC to start trials. And the whole plan could all fall apart if Ray made a change as big as marriage. I wanted to win. I wanted my turn to best Ray, even at the expense of his own version of salvation. I did not suffer for years as his sleeper, nor did I take all those drugs with their unforeseen side effects to be bested by my flighty client. The evening was still young when I woke from Ray's rest. I had gone home feeling ill, and stayed clear of my private lab as well, choosing instead to enjoy the sunset in the living room. It seemed to be the one joy I had left after suffering so much pain from self-administration. My side ached from who knows which part of the cocktail, and the migraines were intolerable. I'd be picking another drug to trial once this detox ended, and then start the misery all over. My balcony afforded a perfect view of the city and the falling sun. Furnishings in my home were simple and utilitarian, but I had picked out a very nice set of yellow lounge chairs for the deck. With no company, they served just me for private screenings of the evening's resplendence. Sometimes I'd push them aside, stand at my easel, and see if I could paint the magnificent colors faster than they'd fade. It was futile, but kept my style loose, something I'd learned to appreciate after being so precise in life and work. Clouds would never lose their appeal, and tonight was spectacular. Settling in one of the chairs, I found the sun sneaking through between two skyscrapers across the river. Such a perfect angle to have threaded that chasm. I moved to the other seat, and the sun moved behind the tower. Just a little change, and my eyes were relieved. I wanted to revel this moment, with the earth bathed in celestial soft yellow light. But I felt like my father, and saw painful metaphor in the blinding sun. Here was Pax SleepFree, the hoax that Carl loathed so much. Everything seemed so alive and vibrant at this perfect hour, the artist hour, the time we all await to see color in even the grayest doldrums. And as long as mountain's majesty or a city skyline block the sun, we can view dusk and its descent to darkness perfectly. All is well. But if you lose the concealment, catch a glimpse of the sun between city towers, the scene is too bright, the blindness desecrating the wonder. Therefore, we watch our perfect moments of daylight's end from perched shelters, knowing that with a simple wrong step, we lose it all. SleepFree bathed the world in such a somber hue to comfort all discomfort, everything as perfect as the best sunset, an artist dream. Our leaders threw up walls, towers, and mountains to conceal the paradox, to dull our senses and to help us forget that the very source of the beauty was in fact the blindingly obvious problem. And like good sheep happy to soak in the sunset, we stayed behind the shelters, afraid to move and glimpse the truth, afraid to see, let alone act. This sunset was wasted. I stood up to return inside, my heart sickened by how easy it was for me to move seats and not face the facts. Pax sleep free, the lie that silenced nations, was crushing forward like an avalanche. Ray was about to cheat the world again, throw up another wall, and lock in the peace of sleep. He'd go to D.C., and Sleep Free would roll on, giving everyone the false life they deserved. Closing the deck doors, I made my way to the medicine cabinet and popped as many aspirin as I knew my body could handle. It was time to get my sleep. Detox had never taken this long before. Chapter 26. Perspective. When I was 11, I seriously tried to escape Ray, believing I could run from my destiny. I begged my father all summer to let me transfer to an all-sleeper school. I get a fresh start when students advance to middle school and act like I came from some other sleeper elementary, not the snobbish school for clients. I was so ready to be done with the humiliation and endless games since age 8. I was even more ready to be done watching Ray live life fully. Every day he gained a new talent, showed off a new skill, played a new game, and slipped further from friend and closer to the embodiment of everything that made me sick. Neverland tried, parenting tried, but teachers, bullies, and comparison made my life absolute hell. I came up with a solution. It did not go as well as planned. Sometimes destiny knocks you over. The 5-minute bell, ringing a little too flat, sounded the first day of my new school. I sat alone, a bastion for the second row. The classroom had desks for 40 students. 7 kids, scattered throughout the room, slouched forward in their chairs, heads to the desks, snatching a few more minutes of sleep. Didn't they know to hide their sleepiness? 10 more students trickled in before the start bell. The metro must have just arrived. Unready to end summer, these too crashed in their seats. Our teacher sat motionless through the bells, deciding whether a welcome was warranted or wasteful. She wasn't old enough to have given up. In fact, she seemed a child compared to my last teachers. But her eyes had no spark. Maybe she was a sleeper. Could that be possible? Didn't teachers have salary exemptions? My previous teachers were all clients, so they could teach longer hours, and so the school could attract the very best, demeaning instructors. She waited for the 5-minute late bell to sound another melancholic alarm before moving. The classroom responded in synchronous step. They all knew the drill. Still students came, unthreatened by tardiness. I could almost hear her bones creak. She was too young. The class rose, pushing down slumber for some rehearsed ritual. I stood up to join the growing throng, not sure what came next. I wasn't about to be the only loner unaware of protocol. Maybe we'd do some morning exercises like I'd read they did in Asia. The speaker crackled. The teacher croaked a command to increase the volume. She wanted all of us to hear. Must be announcements. But why make us stand? Exercises directed by the principal, perhaps? An older woman's voice, one stern with authority, started without introduction. "We will now recite the pledge." I fidgeted nervously. The pledge was illegal. Didn't they know? 50th Amendment or something like that. No coerced act of hateful patriotism. I tried to remember my father repeating the pledge one day at Antietam, choked up by the imagined bleeding dead, but the memory was foggy. I didn't want to be the only one failing this first social test at my new school. My classmates started to mumble along with my teacher. "I am a sleeper. I will always be a sleeper. Because of sleepers, we can save our planet. Because of sleepers, we have equality. I am building a better world. I am happy sleeping." Such was the start of my life at Obama Middle School. We may have lived in the governor's mansion, but the slums were just around the corner, aspects of city life totally unknown to me till now. My sheltered existence filtered undesirable information until I showed up at OMS. The name had a ring of freedom. This school also once carried the name of a slave owner, a constitutional framer, but our community had erased the reverie for revolutionaries. Now this school represented freedom, sleeper freedom. They taught classes in blocks, finding it easier for sleepers compared to very short periods. Monday was history, English, Spanish, and physical education. Tuesday was math, science, and physical education. The rotation repeated Wednesday and Thursday. Friday was to catch up with teachers, get one-on-one help, and introduce working professions. Jobs that could be done in short shifts to supplement sleeping. Everything catered to this lifestyle. Our history lesson was meager, even for the first day of school. I flipped through the table of contents and the first few chapters on my datapad. Nothing about colonists, George Washington, or the Civil War. Everything my father drilled into me was silently missing in action. The first chapter, Restoring the Native Americans, told about the 21st century efforts to cleanse centuries of Western indoctrination and repay the Native Americans for their sacrifice. Chapter 2 followed a similar path for African Americans. History was told through the eyes of the oppressed and how America purged bigotry over the last 50 years. The last 20 chapters told the history of sleepers and what they've accomplished or helped clients accomplish. Maybe the other classes would be less sterile. When the lunch bell interrupted English-Spanish, I stood up, excited for a break from low expectations. No one in the class moved. Seemed I couldn't stand or sit at the right time for this school. A man in clean clothes, face mask, and nitrile blue gloves entered our room with a cart and 40 lunches on trays of recycled pulp product. I kept quiet, playing it cool. At the teacher's word, we lined up to select our tray, most heads locked on the ground. The floor was mesmerizing. Old white and green tiles in checkered patterns told of years of shuffling between the door and the desks, with a big worn spot devouring the once bright evergreen squares at the front of the room. 9 trays claiming the cart's bottom shelf were specially labeled for those with gluten allergies, vegetarian needs, or halal requirements. We quietly took our trays back to the desks and ate our meals. No one spoke. I later learned they were allowed to converse, but time was precious for a sleeper. No reason to waste it walking to a lunchroom, waiting for others to pick out their food, or chatting over a meal. I had my credit card out as usual, ready to purchase the meal, but they were all free. Language class resumed after lunch, with an interruption for physical education. Gym teachers seemed to be the one constant in the universe, regardless of school. The squat, muscular man in a black cap barked orders from the start. "Wake up! Let's get moving!" The class wanted to argue, but they knew the drill. "We'll start each day with a kilometer. Have to get the blood flowing. Have to wear you out before the next sleep." I was not dressed to run, but that was not an acceptable excuse. He looked me up and down, smirking at my polished loafers. "Maybe your last PE teacher loved excuses, but not in this class. Start running," he commanded. As I lifted my legs to move, he yelled, "And come more prepared tomorrow." I earned matching blisters for that run. Not my finest, but I passed a number of students stuck in a lethargic mire. After a review of Spanish verbs, material known by all the class, we had 30 minutes of free time to do our homework. I finished it quickly and wondered if it was always this way. At 2 p.m., the final bell rang loud and clear, slightly sweeter than the morning. My class bolted out the door. It was the most energy I had seen all day, far more than in PE. I had somehow missed the normally disruptive sounds of kids getting ready to leave. They were all gone before I had gathered my stuff. The teacher gave me an odd look, a silent question of why it took me so long. These kids valued their time and wanted a window to play before working. If they were lucky, they might play and eat again before their own sleep. All else was meaningless. Day 2 began with the same poor attendance and even blearier eyes. They still made no effort to hide their sleepiness. One kid let out a big yawn during the first period and the whole class reciprocated. Where was the training? More stretched awkwardly right during a lesson or rubbed their eyes. It was painful to watch these students. No one had trained them. At my old school, if you didn't act alert at all times, the bullies would eat you alive. This was a client world. Pretending was mandatory. As I observed my classmates, I noticed 4 very different students in the back. Their clothes were of the same quality as the rest of the class, but they didn't act the same. They looked rested. While mumbling through the sleeper pledge, finding it better to play along even in ignorance, I shot a glance back at these 4. 2 girls and 1 boy kept their mouths shut, refusing to recite the pledge. The fourth, a scraggly kid with dark curls, joined the pledge but only mouthed the words. He seemed to know they applied to him, but dared not accept the truth. I leaned over to my de facto guide for the sleeper scroll. Her name was Anaya, and she was so kind, her smile shining through the yawns. "What's the story with those four?" I asked, pointing to the back. "Oh, they haven't started yet." I felt so out of place and lost in this school. Even the vernacular was new. "Started?" I begged for clarity. She laughed, finding me a very strange person. "Started sleeping, like us." She looked down and pointed at my arms as if the answer was obvious. "3 of them are still holding out hope. Their parents are crazy or something. Childhood can't last forever. As for Robbie," she pointed to the kid with curls, "he's about to start. Any day now. We'll throw him a party. Help soften the news. Lets him know he's not alone." What a concept. Anaya, the content sleeper in a happy yellow dress, was proof I had made the right choice coming to this school. They celebrated sleepers. Students had empathy. I liked this place. Tuesday education started with math. Our teacher yawned once, such a bad example for this class, and then migrated to the board. This was the second day in a row she wore hospital clothes in various shades of drab blue. No one ever wore these coarse garments in my family's circle, including at school. Fixing her ponytail, she began, "As it's the first day of math, you'll have to take the placement exam." 5 kids completely collapsed, an almost epileptic instinct at the mention of work. "I know, nobody likes taking tests, but I got to know how much you remember from last year, so I know where to start." Anaya leaned over to me and whispered with a suppressed giggle, "I don't remember anything." I chuckled, but the teacher made no notice. "Our goal for Obama Middle School is that every student moves to the next grade. You can only do that if you pass the end-of-year state math exam." 2 more fell over, wriggling in horror at the mention of a second test. She didn't get mad at them, let alone punish them. There was no control in this room. "My job is to make sure you pass that test. You don't want to be stuck in the 6th grade forever." The class nodded quickly on demand, as if they had heard this same lecture every year. Education aimed at passing a test, the only goal to move on. I felt like a cow being driven to the slaughterhouse. Pass the test, John. Graduate to the next grade, John. Start contributing to society as an adult sleeper, John. The test popped up automatically on my datapad. I looked at Anaya, feeling after just a day that here was my best hope, my lifeline into this new world. She knew I didn't belong. Whether from the shoes or my dumb looks, she knew. "Just don't overthink it. The lower the grade you get, the better. Then they start us at a lower level with no expectations." Anaya flipped her hair, unfazed at the audacity of her wisdom, and started the test. I couldn't force myself to fail that test. It covered material from 3rd grade, testing only basic multiplication. I forced myself to go slow and still finished long before the rest of the class. They knew how to milk the moment. Actual lessons that day were equally pathetic, but it was just the first day for math and science. They would surely get better. When the end of the day came and the students vanished as fast as the first, I approached my teacher. She looked shocked, like no one had ever come to her desk, backing up in her rolling chair with every inch I moved closer. "What do you want?" she asked, interrupting my approach. "Sorry to bug you, but I just wondered if we had any homework." Her head tilted, unsure whether I was serious or just stupid. "No homework today, or any day. Where was your last school?" I didn't answer, and she continued shaking her head. "This district doesn't allow homework for sleepers. That's what the 30 minutes are for, with catch-up time on Friday." No homework? I wanted to shout for joy, but managed to keep my cool and avoid further embarrassment. "Oh yeah, I just thought that was an elementary school thing. Good to know." Forcing out an awkward nod, she ended the conversation. "Well, you better hurry on home. Don't want to miss the metro." I ran outside, almost cheering at the thought of no homework. Ever. Sleeper life may not be so bad. Say a weird pledge each day and finish school early without homework. For the first time in years, I was excited to tell my dad about school when he tucked me in on night 2. I sat up, legs under the blankets, and told him all about the lessons, the lack of homework, the free lunches, the pledge, the gym teacher, and so on. He listened with a frown on his face, raising a few eyebrows or letting out a few grimaces along the way that I ignored. "And you know what, Dad? There are no bullies." The new realization hit me with profound joy. I smiled wide. "No one picks on other kids. We're all equals. A classroom of sleepers." He stood up from my bed and adjusted the frame of the photo, squaring out the Civil War heroes. "Yes, John, all equals. But at what cost?" "What, Dad?" I asked, unsure what he meant. That picture always did weird things to him. "Oh, nothing. Sleep well. Good night." "Good night, Dad." It was probably the happiest, most peaceful I'd felt since becoming a sleeper. Wednesday worked much the same way. I memorized the pledge at home, unwilling to stumble through it again. "I am a sleeper. I will always be a sleeper. Because of sleepers, we can save our planet. Because of sleepers, we have equality. I am building a better world. I am happy sleeping." By Thursday, something about the pledge didn't seem right. Even as a sixth grader, I knew something was wrong. And the more I repeated the phrase, the sicker I felt, sure that the strange incantation might turn my mind and will to mush. When we finished the pledge on Friday, I looked back to find Robbie crying. "Anaya," I whispered, "what's wrong with Robbie?" She smiled, revealing her happiness for Robbie. "He's been selected. Going to sleep for some private school kid." How could she smile? How could they all find this perfectly normal? The words came back to me. I am a sleeper. I will always be a sleeper. No! A snap of Anaya's fingers brought me back from the brainwashing trance. "You okay? You dazed away for a minute." "Yes, I'm good, thanks," I lied. This was not right. "Well, party is tomorrow. I'll flip you the invite." No one invited me to anything at my old school, except Ray, of course. "These parties are real? Your parents pay for them?" "No," she rebutted, almost shocked at my rudeness. "We can afford some fun. Our families don't keep all the earnings. Many of us get paid pretty good around here. Lots of snobs at the private school. You know, the one with the clock tower over on Broadway?" I knew the school all too well and nodded, not daring to admit I went there myself. These sleepers had to put up with my classmates? No way Anaya could be this happy working for any old classmate of mine. Our teacher announced the plans for Friday lessons. Half the day doing busy work, half the day getting one-on-one time with teachers if needed. The whole day was a joke. I finished the pointless assignment in an hour, unsure what to do. Anaya urged me to simmer down and pace myself, but my body ached over missing the challenge. No one at Obama Middle School would ever push me to be better or achieve more. This was a sleeper sedation breeding school. At my old school I was challenged. No one believed in me either, but I had a chance. And maybe I even missed the ridicule. I too had been conditioned. I was a sleeper. I might stay a sleeper, but I wasn't going down without a fight. When my father came home late that night, I rushed up to him before he could take off his suit coat. He looked down at me and frowned. Maybe he knew, or maybe he hoped. "Dad, I have to quit. I can't take it. I'm better off anywhere else. Please send me back." "You'll go back to your old school Monday," he reassured. But I made you cancel. They'll never take me back." "Everything will be fine." He patted my shoulder, unsure how to treat all my affection and energy this week. "Now go get ready for bed. Run along." I did as commanded, running down the massive hallway, passing the hated office, and bounding up the stairs. I would never make that pledge again. I needed a new pledge, a commitment to help my fellow sleepers. Monday brought me back to my familiar school and terrible classmates, back to being first in the room, back to the teasing, and back to watching Ray waste my life. My father had never canceled my enrollment or explained my choice to the Matsons. He knew I wouldn't survive a real sleeper school, though I lasted 2 days longer than he expected. My class thought I was just sick the first week of school. "Did you have that nasty sleeper sickness, John?" they jeered. I answered silently, "Yes, and I won't catch it again. I so pledge."